You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and I'm pretty excited because I got a lot of cool friends. And so I'm starting a new series where I get to interview my cool friends about the cool things they do. So the first person I'm bringing on to talk about the cool things they do is Amy. So hi, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I met Amy at She Podcasts. Oh gosh, was it 2019?
Yeah, because it was right before the pandemic stuff.
Before the pandemic. Now, this part I don't remember. I know that we became friends by sitting on a floor, but I can't remember if I was sitting on the floor or you were sitting on the floor.
You were sitting on the floor.
I was sitting on the floor.
And I too like to sit on the floor. I was like, oh, there she is. She's sitting on the floor. I'm going to sit with her. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
And then other people joined us and we had a group of floor friends and it was amazing.
It was great.
That was a fun weekend of learning about podcast stuff, hanging out with other podcasters.
Going to a cemetery.
Yes, we went to a cemetery because I think in some aspect we're all enjoy spookiness or are spooky.
Yes, there's a spooky aspect. Yes.
There's a spooky aspect. And if I remember correctly, you used to live in a cemetery. Sorry, that memory just popped up.
I did. I lived at the gatekeeper's house at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond when I was in college.
Now, did you ever find it to be terrifying?
I had two kind of spooky experiences there. One was with the sleep paralysis situation.
Oh my God.
And one, that was whenever you have sleep paralysis and there's 64,000 dead people in your backyard, it's a little bit scary.
I just got a chill.
Yeah, that was creepy. And then my cabinets opened one time without me doing anything, and that creeped me out too.
Oh my gosh. I get freaked out enough when my cat will stop and look at somewhere random on the wall. And I'm like, is there a ghost there? So probably. I can only imagine how much I would imagine because of 64,000 people's final resting spot. Oh my gosh. So yes. So we met at a podcast conference, and so we are both podcasters. Do you want to talk a little bit about the podcast that you produce?
Yeah, I do a podcast called Starling. It started out being about creative process and sharing a little bit about art history, a little bit about my own process, and now it's more like why we make art, what's the purpose, and stuff like that. And I used to be very regular about it. And now it's when I feel the mood, I make one.
Yeah. Well, can I tell you though, the pandemic has been really challenging, and I've been on hiatuses, and I had a garage sale and my dog was sick. And I was I forgot to edit the episode I already had recorded to put out. Well, it'll come out next week.
Exactly. We're on a different timeline. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Time does not exist. It is the wild, wild west.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So the idea of looking for this podcast, people might say the next episode might come out in the next 4 months or so.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm thinking quarterly now. There's about 50 already out there, and
that's a pretty good library to listen to, right? Yeah. So if they get started listening to one a week, that by the time they get to episode 50, there might be a few other episodes to add on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Yeah, because in my daily life, I'm an art teacher, and so art seemed like the right thing to do. But, but you know how it is, because I know you do this too. Once you start with something, then all these other little aspects kind of come in, and you're like, oh, I could talk about this, and I could do this, and
Yeah, I do this all the time, and I could probably have 10 episodes a month plus if this was my full-time job. But unfortunately, indie podcasting pays nothing.
Very little.
I consider it to be a hobby, much like if I did cross stitch or something, and you pay for supplies and the time and that sort of thing. So I just think of it that way. But I just love to be able to talk about friendship and talk with friends and all that kind of good stuff. So there is some benefit to it. And sometimes there's weeks that it just can't happen. And I'm sure you have something to say about that in terms of creative process.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's plenty of times when, it's like the muse isn't there this week. And so, I have to, I go into action when prompted.
Yeah. I should have a friendship muse.
Yeah. I think we should all be inventing our own anyway.
Next art project.
Yeah. Well, actually, it literally is my next art project at school for my students. They're going to create their own.
Okay. I might have to join your class. I might be a little bit too old for middle school, but that's okay.
Come on in. It's awkward and fun.
That I wholeheartedly believe. But so since the podcast conference, we haven't seen each other in person, but there's also a global pandemic happening. So that obviously puts a little, what's the word I'm looking for? A little kink in the plans, whatever. Is that the right terminology?
It works.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So it really puts a damper on things, but we stay in contact, I would say, through Facebook. And so one of the things that I have noticed in the last several months is that you posting a tarot card each day with a description. And it's such a beautiful tarot card set. And I know that you have some history there. And so I was like, you know what? I'm a tarot novice, and Amy seems to be into this more than I understand. And so I want to learn more about it because it's cool and I want to hear about it. So that's why Amy is here today, so we can all learn about tarot. So my first question for you is, how did you come to tarot? So what was your introduction to it?
I was born into it. My grandmother, so I'm Romney on my mom's side. And so my grandmother was a fortune teller. And so I grew up with her doing that. And it was just kind of normal for me. I was also I stayed with her in the summers and stuff. And she lived basically in my backyard. So I could be at her house at any time. And so I just grew up around it. And I was often the person who met her clients at the door and waited for, was like, she'll be out with her in just a few moments, know. And while she used tarot some, and she had a crystal ball and a tea set, she could do tea leaves and stuff.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
But, for the most part, she really just read people and energy, probably more than anything else. But so I first saw tarot on her table as a child. I did not learn from her in the fact that she told me that you should never tell someone their future until they're at least 18.
Oh,
so she didn't want me to she didn't want to tell me anything about my future, because she believed if you told a child that they would make things happen.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So, but watching it and being around it, I think I bought my first deck when I was about 16 and started trying to learn on my own. And so it's been something that I've been around and working with for literally forever.
That's amazing. To even think born into it, I was like, wow, it really has been a part of you forever. And so it probably will be from here on out, right? Yeah. So then when you bought your first tarot set, you said that you sort of taught yourself. At any point, did you do any, I don't know, is there formalized training or any of those sorts of things? Or is that something that's typically passed down or people learn on their own, say through, I know tarot card decks will have a guidebook. Do you read books on it? How did you come to be able to do this yourself?
Well, I honestly did start with just the little books that come in the back of the deck, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I think as an art person too, because I've always been an artist, art major, art teacher, art, it's all it's all visual language.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, it's if you just let the image talk to you and you have any understanding of symbolism, and then you can notice how the symbolism in one card works with the symbolism in another card. And I'll be real honest, when I was, let me think, in my teens and then going especially into my 20s, I studied paganism and went to circles, and you start learning the correspondences and the connection between the different elements and the different suits. And I feel with this kind of knowing, there's no certain place to start. You just pick up something and you start, and that leads you from one thing to the next until you're like, oh, well, this connects to the Kabbalah and this connects to numerology and palmistry. And you just start putting it all together. And then suddenly you've got all these correspondences and you can see the symbolism in the visual language.
Yeah. So was that something, understanding symbolism, do you think that you learned more about it because you were learning about tarot? Or was that something that maybe you understood before you started with your first tarot deck?
I think they were probably kind of mixed together because I was taking, art in high school and learning about different symbolism from different time periods and history. And then some of that same stuff comes up in tarot and you're like, oh, well, wait, this flower is here and it represents this. And so I think they're very intrinsically connected, and it's hard to know which one came first.
No, that makes sense, because it's like, I took an art appreciation or art history class, and I feel like there was a lot of time spent on symbolism. So I had just remembered I took that class now. It's been some time. All these memories are popping up as if they've never, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
It's deep in there. It'll come through.
So when did you start reading tarot for other people?
I've been reading tarot for friends since I got my first deck. And, I think there is a difference between reading for people that and you might already have a little bit of an understanding where they're coming from, and reading for strangers.
Okay. Yeah.
But for some, like I remember in college, like being in the dorms and reading for people as a way to make friends, as a way to I'm like, oh, well, I can read your cards if you want to hang out, and then reading for money probably started, I started that in my 30s probably. So I'd been reading on my own before I actually started charging anybody for a long time.
Yeah. What do you enjoy about being able to read the cards for, whether it be a friend or for a stranger?
I really feel like it's like therapy. I feel like a lot of times when I'm reading for someone for the first time, particularly if they've never had a reading, which for some reason I tend to get a lot of people who've never had a reading before, and they expect me to be like, ooh, and the cards tell me that you're, whatever. And I'm like, no, this is very much a dialogue and a conversation, and I'll tell you what I'm seeing, and like, you can tell me how this relates to your life. And, I can ask you, some people don't want to share. And those are the hardest to read for. I'm like, well, it says this. How does that make you feel? And they're like, And like, and I'm like, well, we're not going to get very far. But if a person is willing to have the back and forth, we can get really far and really deep, really quick.
Gotcha.
And it really can be an expansive way to get to know someone and connect with someone. And, I think too, that it is, as far as that quickness goes, it really allows people to, when they see it and it's mirrored to them in an image, it gives them almost permission to like access things.
Yeah, I've had it done a couple times, and but as I said, I'm a novice, so like sometimes I don't know. Like the first time I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to tell them things? Like maybe I've watched too much TV and media where I have some like preconceived notions about things or how things are supposed to go. And so what are some of those things that you notice that help people understand tarot that you wish they would say unlearn or unknow?
Right. Yeah. I think that the main thing that I would say is that the reading is for you. And so how you want it to go is whatever energy you bring to it is what you'll get back. Yeah. So if you're going to be really secretive and shut down and expect the reader to just like pick up on all the cues and do the work for you, then it is good of a reading. Whereas if you are more open to the process and like, it's not, the information is either going to be flat and static and here's the information, or it can be interactive. Yeah. Whereas like, I can be like, oh, you got the Hanged Man. Have you lately been going through an experience where you feel like things are a little topsy-turvy and like, are you getting a new perspective on things? And if you're just like, no, I'd keep going, then that's the reading you're going to get. Whereas if you're like, you know what? Yeah, like this is happening. And I could I might get more hits because of the information that you give me, or I can just give you the basic information.
Yeah, do you find that a lot of people who come, and maybe this isn't the case because of coming to you maybe frequently or word of mouth and that sort of thing, do you find that you get a lot of people come to you and are closed off from the experience?
Some of them start off closed, but like particularly like I usually do, I have 30-minute sessions and hour-long sessions. And if you pay for an hour-long session and you're closed off, we're done in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so a lot of them might come into it kind of closed off. And if we can actually start to have the conversation, they open. I do know that a lot of times people are like, is it okay to cry? Because sometimes it brings up like emotional stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like most people, when we hit something, there's crying. Yeah. And I know I've done a good job then. and I know that sounds...
Cry, baby, cry. No, I'm just kidding.
I know that it sounds weird, but I know I'm like, okay, then we're on the right track. We're releasing something. We're doing the thing to move this forward. I used to do this thing when I lived in Pennsylvania. I did what I called tarot Tupperware parties, which was like basically like a woman, or it was always women. Men don't normally do this. But they would invite friends over and I'd be like the entertainment for the night. And either I'd read in front of people or they'd like socialize and I'd take people into a different room or whatever. And I remember like the first one or two of those I did, someone would come out crying and then the other people were like, I don't know.
I thought this was supposed to be.
And I'm like, it's fun. And even the people that were crying were like, no, it's great. You should do it.
As they're crying. It's so good.
Yeah, it's good. It's just, you're going to cry.
I went to a gathering of friends and there was someone reading cards there. And was my first experience. And then my university, some students put on like a fair of different types of things. And so a student of mine read my cards. And then I have done one of a podcast friend that we share online where she sent me information. And so I think those are the only 3 times that I've had it. And I think I'm fairly open. I was a little nervous around the student, like,
that would be a little bit nervous. Yeah. I recently just read for one of my former students. Like I taught her in 7th and 8th grade and she's in college now.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, can you do a reading for me? And I was like, this might be weird, but it wasn't weird. It was great.
Well, yeah, I think this was like the student, is currently at the university, could currently be in my classes and that sort of thing. But yeah, former students, come read my cards.
Yes.
Please, all of you,
have you ever looked at it, reading it yourself, or like had a deck? Or
I do have a deck, and I'm chuckling because I really want the Golden Girls deck, but I think like that's probably maybe crossing a line of what
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think whatever speaks to your soul is perfect.
Yeah, but I'm like, but I've never had the Golden Girls, but we have like a shop in town that has tarot and crystals and they sell tea and have different things going on. And I just found this deck that was really pretty. I'd have to go get it. I don't know who the artist is, but that's one of the things is like, that's what originally, when I saw your posts every day, those to me, like the deck was just like beautiful art, right? Like, and so for me, like, that's what I got. And so I've done stuff where I like look at a card or two, but I've never learned what it all means. So I just feel like when I went to the fair where my students reading, it was like, I can look at past, present, and future, or we can do it this way. So it seems like there might be different ways to read cards. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, each reader that you go to will have their own way that they do it. Yeah. Some people, like if you're doing you can ask, like, I want to look at past, present, future. I want to look at the energy I bring to a situation, the energy that the situation is offering me, the energy that I need to invite to help me through something. I love the way I read is it's a spread that I learned from somewhere back in the 90s, and it's still my favorite.
Okay, yeah.
It's called the Cup of Life spread. And it gives you 2 directions that you can go instead of saying, oh, this is where you're going.
Yeah.
And I have myself figured out that a lot of times it's like one of the paths will be the external, the way that it presents, and the other path will be the internal, the experience of it.
Yeah.
So, and you can make up your own spread. You can be like, okay, this card's going to mean this, and you just lay it out, and that's what it means.
And then see what symbolism is there and that sort of thing. So this is a real technical procedural question.
No problem.
How many cards are in a deck?
Most decks, it'll be 72.
72. Okay.
But the deck that I read from, so it has a male and female king in each suit.
Oh, okay.
And so some decks will have stuff like that where it's like an extra 2 or 3 things that, so they can vary, but you've got 22 major arcana cards.
Okay.
And then you've got 4 suits. And then each suit has king, queen, page, knight, and then the 1 through 10.
Okay, yeah. So then, and I'm asking as a novice, so please strike any questions from the record. But is there a card that is typically a common pull for people, or is there one that maybe people hope to get or not hope to get? Is there any sort of things you've noticed from reading cards and what those cards might be?
Well, one of the things you might notice if you follow the ones that I pull every day is I go through periods where I'll pull the same card at least once or twice a week.
Wow.
And, so I think as far as that kind of stuff, the energies that are around that want to be noticed will continue to come through over and over again until you notice them. And I think that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with some of the cards. Most people don't want to see the death card, although that's also because they usually don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people don't want to see the tower.
Yeah.
Because if you know anything about tarot, that usually means something's about ready to be destroyed. And so, but at the same time, these carry positive energies as well of transformation, of change. And so it also depends on what cards are around it. So they influence each other.
Okay.
And as far as ones that people want, everybody depends on what the questions are, but everybody loves to get the lovers, especially if it's a romantic card,
Boo. No, just kidding.
Exactly. And then, I think there's a lot of the cards that represent, the 2 of Cups also represents love, but there are cards like the 9 of Cups, which are wish fulfillment cards and things like that people like to get those ones.
I find it really interesting, as someone who teaches a class called The Dark Side of Interpersonal Communication, and talking about in relationships and in communication, there are dark things that happen, but without the light, there can't be dark, and without the dark, there can't be the light. So they're both going to exist. And so we talk a lot about in the class, just as an example, that, perhaps I'm trying to think of one without being envy. That envy is seen as inherently negative and problematic. But however, envy can be motivating, so it could be something positive. And so I really like the idea that these cards that people are like, I don't want to get this card. But the tower, you said something is about to be destroyed. I'm like, but what if I kick it down myself? Something that's been if I destroy something that's been problematic in my life, that seems positive. And so I really like this idea that you can't focus on, and I would assume that love also might have a dark side, that it's not always positive to get the 2 cups, for example. So I just find that really fascinating. And so I imagine that it can push people to think about how to read or to pick up the meaning of something based on what it's coupled with or what's near it. And that can't always assume that something's going to be negative or positive.
And the thing is, we're at play in a field of opposites. That's the whole thing, is that we are embedded in a world of duality, and people want it to be one way or another. And there are cards in the tarot that remind you that actually the goal here is to find balance between the forces and be able to embrace both sides of things. And I think that it's really hard for humans to do. It's really hard for us to like understand that we're the fulcrum point, the point that things turn one way or the other, and tarot is a good way to remember that actually like, even though something seems negative right now, it might be leading you to something positive and vice versa. Like a lot of times that toxic positivity and people wanting it to be all wonderful is not going to get you far,
No, I just feel like you need to experience the whole experience of emotions, right? Not just ignoring other emotions besides ones that are positive. And one of the examples I often give in my class, something that's inherently positive is social support, providing support for someone. But I think we've all been on the end of like really bad social support. So we know it's not always good. In fact, it can be harmful.
Yeah, definitely.
People are not, they're giving this support they think you want, but it's actually not what you want or what you need. And so yeah, that really resonates with me, that we need to think about more of being balanced. And I guess that leads me to a question. You talked about like maybe the purpose is finding balance. Like what is, as someone who reads cards or reads tarot, what is the ultimate outcome? Like what are you hoping is the end outcome for those that you're reading cards for?
So this is a hard question for me.
Okay.
Because I think the end outcome that I hope is that it just moves them into another process. This idea of there being an end outcome. Like to me, because my whole podcast is about creative process, and we're always in
that's
process.
Never ending.
And it's never ending. And it's like imagining that the last note in a song is the most important part of the song. And the truth is the whole song is the journey through it is the important part, the thing to enjoy. And so I think that if anything, I'm hoping that when people have an experience in tarot is that they're able to like see the process more fully, to like be able to pull out and see it as a whole instead of the part that they're going through. To me, that's kind of where I'd go with it.
And like, I guess that as the novice here, that maybe tarot isn't about an end outcome per se. It's about continuously, it's the same thing. Like this resonates as someone who teaches about relationships and being in happy, healthy, and safe relationships, that you can't just, work on your relationship on Valentine's Day, anniversaries, birthdays, etc. That it's an everyday thing. It's like, you have to take care of your car. It has to get tires rotated. It needs to get gas. Like it's a continuous process. This is adulthood, right? The laundry is never done, right?
Right.
So that is tarot. So I understand that more, because maintaining relationships is never done. Laundry is never done. Tarot is never done.
It's never done. And in tarot, there's two parts. There's the major arcana and the minor arcana. Okay. And the major arcana is like moments in the life process. And if you look at it as a whole, like it can be a really great thing for like writers or artists to like these cards and like put them out and be like, oh, well, this happens to the character, then this, then this, then this.
Oh,
and then so that they can kind of like build a story around how a character would go through these moments. Yeah. And I think that it is all about process, and it's all about the movement through, because when you get to the 22, which is the world card, then you just go back to the 0, which is the Fool, that holds all the potential to get to the to the new process. And so it's a continuation. It's just like more like a spiral than a circle, though. Should expand each time.
It makes me think, like you mentioned, like I think that'd be really cool as a writer to do that as part of the process. I also think like you pull a card each day, and I imagine a lot of people do as a way as they journey through life, like what experience they're in now, maybe what they're looking for in the future to understand something. And so is that something that you would encourage as someone who reads tarot? Is that you could do it yourself, as well as going to see the professionals, right? that it could be part of, it makes me think of, and I realize it's not the same, But like, you know how people pull out, like, there's like cards with quotes, like motivation for like the week ahead, or manifesting, or those sorts of things, that, you know, if it works for you, it might help you with that process, whatever it might be. If it's life in general, the workplace, art project, whatever it is that you might be doing.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I started pulling one a day kind of like to test myself a little bit so that I could pull them, because I try to write like 3 little paragraphs about the card each day. And so for me, it's been like a way to consider energy and like how I can communicate. So it's like, how can I share this energy with someone else and like communicate it? And it's also like, for me, it's noticing what's around that I can pay attention to for that day. So it almost gives me like a meditation for the day that I can, okay, today's focus is destruction. Or, you know, today's focus is the high priestess, which is like feminine energy and magic and intuition. And so if that's like the theme for the day, then it gives me just kind of a way to play with all the things that I see. And so I think too, maybe this is going to sound bad, I don't know. I think tarot is kind of a gateway into like self-knowing and and like wanting to know yourself better and know those around you better and and a gateway to reading symbolism. I think, okay, I'm going to be really weird for a second.
Okay, please.
I think the world is constantly trying to mirror things to us in a symbolic way to invite us more into our own process. And so if you read it on a card, you start being able to read it in the world around you and the things that you encounter and come in contact with.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't sound weird at all. It just sounds like you have this like concrete, practical thing in your hand. And then, you know, it's one of those things that like a student will say, now that we started talking about gender communication in class, I see it everywhere. I'm like, that's right, you do. Because now you're understanding, your mind is open to it, and then you can see it, and then you can process it and see what it means for you, for the world, whatever the case is. So absolutely not weird at all. Or we're weird together.
Yay. And I feel like particularly like symbolism can be very individual. And I did an episode on Starling about that, where I talked about my own relationship, but it's like, I might really like spiders and they don't freak me out. And I think of them as like, you know, a web of, you know, building the web of life and like this beautiful creator kind of energy. Whereas if you got bit by a brown recluse when you were a child, they might be terrifying. So the symbolism is going to be different based on us individually. And that invites us to go deeper into what things mean to us personally. And I think that's a big thing that we miss, because I talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh, well, I bought this dream interpretation book, or I went and like read this thing and it means this. And I'm like, but does it mean that to you?
Yeah.
And like, it's hard for people to think that the authority is not the little book that comes with the tarot deck. The authority is actually you. And once you like start to understand how you read symbols and how you read things and how it relates to you, then you get more confident in your own vision and your own path.
I think sometimes like with things like that, like I took a psychoanalytic class and part of the class was about dreams. And was it Freud who dealt with dreams? I don't remember.
Freud and Jung both did it.
Yeah. Okay. I think the teacher focused on Freud, but we had like a book where it was like it outlined dreams and that sort of thing. And I think sometimes we want to fit ourselves into a box or a category. But like, I have very few dreams I remember, but there's like 3 to 4 specifics that I have several times. So if I just go look and say, well, Freud says that you wish you had more sex or something, I'm like, okay, Freud, actually,
sounds like Freud.
See, I did learn in that class. But like, I think it's more important to understand like what that dream means to me, maybe in that moment, or why am I having that dream? And I started to realize there's certain dreams that I have starting about end of July, early August, which means it's sort of like the Sunday scaries leading up to school starting, right? And so that means something to me that a teacher friend who's not a teacher would not sort of interpret it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really like this idea that instead of just placing ourselves in a box, like what does it actually mean for us? And what does it mean for us in this moment? Because I can imagine that if I'm continuously pulling cards of tarot, depending on where I'm in life, what experiences I'm having, my health, my relationships, etc., that those meanings could change, that more things might open up, some things might get closed off, that we are constantly changing. And there's an entire, like, probably a bajillion industry for like self-help where people are trying to fit into these categories where, you said at the beginning that it's like therapy, and maybe that's what we should have picked up on at the very beginning as an important point.
It really is. And like, I do think that if you are, like you were saying, like how if you pick up on it, like at one point and you're like, oh, I got this card when I was sick. But then you get it at another point when you're having a different kind of, I don't know, you lost a job or something.
Mm-hmm.
The energy might be the same. And so then you're learning to read and recognize the pattern in it that underlies the thing. And then you're like, oh, when I'm feeling this, it's that there's something is out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps with pattern recognition of things that aren't seen, the unseen things that they're there, they format things, but we don't see them. And learning to recognize how to read that's a skill.
Yeah. I think that is helpful to navigating life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've mentioned energy a few times in our chat so far, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what you mean by energy, what that might mean as related to tarot, just.
Sure. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain it. So, each card in the tarot, for example, is kind of representative of an archetypal energy. Okay. And if you think about archetypes are this like pattern that comes through, that's repeated, that are kind of not things that we can actually talk about. So humans, we make art and we make stories and we do these things to try to explain these archetypal patterns that repeat. And energy can be an impression of that archetypal force. So like the archetypal energy, I think I mentioned the high priestess earlier. So the archetypal energy of the high priestess is a feminine, intuitive kind of energy. And the male version of that in the deck is the Hierophant, which is like spiritual authority. And so, so you'll feel like there's a feminine, that's a receptive energy that will can take it in and process it differently. And then there is the more externally focused masculine energy. And so there's ways that the tarot kind of teaches you to pick up on these things and notice that they're all equal, that the feminine is not less than the masculine, that there are ways that you encounter this energy in the world in repeated fashions. And you can tell, and once you learn to read it, you can be like, oh, this one doesn't feel right.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you come into contact with someone who's like, oh, I'm a high priestess and I know these things, but it doesn't feel in alignment with what you felt before, you can be like, something's off. And so it kind of can train you to trust your own instinct about situations. If you can.
Yeah. Because I think when I was in graduate school and on the first day at Penn State, my friend Carla came up to me. Well, she's my friend now. Obviously, first day is getting to know people. But after having our orientation, things like that, she's like, I can tell that you have positive energy, positive vibes, and you're the kind of people I want to be around. And I always remembered that as I had not heard that from anyone before. And I was like, I think I am good people. Thank you.
I felt that way on the floor with you as well.
Yes, she joined me on the floor, folks, right? But I just, I don't think that is something that is often taught or encouraged or we learn. But also I think there's moments when we know something doesn't feel right or someone doesn't feel right. And that's truly what you're talking about when it comes to energy, right? And that,
Have you read the book, The Power of Fear?
I have part of it, but not all of it.
Because I think that's a really good one for like, if you like in that book, they talk about how most people, when they're put in a situation where they're like either robbed or raped or hurt, had an instinct that the energy was off and that they shouldn't move in the way that they moved. And then something happened to them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like, perhaps that thing was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
But like learning to trust that your instinct is telling you this situation is off. It's a good skill to learn, because if you sense that this situation is off, then you can act in accordance to what feels like how you should respond. Whereas I do feel like we've been taught by our culture to suppress that.
Yeah.
Unless there is a factual data-based evidence for why you feel the way you feel, then you don't really feel that way. Yeah. And that's not true.
Well, and I feel like why it didn't become more of a thing, because I feel like this was Oprah on her show was always like the little hairs on the back of my neck stood up, talking about intuition, right? We just have that feeling, and you think we would have got more from it. Oprah was on every channel, at that time. But that's the only thing I remember about learning anything about how we sort of feel about the energy or that intuition. That's the only time I remember hearing anything about it.
I think I was really lucky because I was raised in a tradition that is like, oh no, you trust this. Even though like, I remember when I was like in high school, my mom one day was like, don't go out the front door. When you go out the front door, you're going to fall down the steps. And I was like, liar, I was like, you don't want to listen to your mom at 16, So what did I do? I went out the front door and I fell down the steps.
Oh my gosh.
And so like, but I was raised around people that were like, trust that feeling, believe that feeling. You're right. It's real. Where I think a lot of people are told that's made up. You're making this up. It's not real. There's no such thing. And so I feel very privileged to have had a life that has allowed me to stay with my own instincts and intuition.
I talk about, intuition a little bit when I talk about like, how do we come to know things? So research methods types classes, which is a lot of is scientific based or maybe a little bit more artful based, thinking about interviews or other types of analyses. But how do we know what we know? We know things from experience. We know things from authority and experts. We know things, but we know things because we feel it. Like and so I hate when people say things like that's not credible or that doesn't matter or those sorts of things, because I think we've all had that moment where something doesn't feel right, and I'm sure there's lots of moments where the energy's good, right? But I think that maybe we are more likely to remember negative things.
Well, like our brain is literally wired to do that. So,
so it's very like, oh my God. Right. And so I think we've all had that experience, and I don't think we would tell ourselves, like, let's not gaslight ourselves and say that it's not real or it's not credible, because I think the world, the space, our body, whatever the case is trying to tell us something, and we need to listen.
Right. And, I think that we've kind of been living embedded into this world that's very scientific focused since since for a long time, for a long time, we've been in this.
As students world. Might say, since the dawn of time.
Right. And we've been trying to learn things externally that are externally provable to the group. And, I think that it's really important to know that there are some things that are not going to be able to be proven externally. And I love people that are willing to go out and go on the ghost hunts and try to prove things that are, I do. And I appreciate that. However, I also kind of believe that this stuff is meant for you to know. Yeah. And it is personal, and trusting it within yourself. It may be true for you alone. Yeah. And that is good enough. And it does not have to be provable to anyone else. It is your experience, and you can own it as your own experience. Yeah. And so like when you are learning to read energy, you're also learning to trust yourself, because somebody else in the group might feel a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that, if we don't trust ourselves, that can lead us down paths that maybe we don't want to go down. and that a lot of times, right, we don't give ourselves the permission to listen to ourselves, or to even take time to understand how we might be feeling, or those sorts of things. That we just write ourselves off, and it's kind of like, no, I think the person we should trust the most is ourselves.
Definitely. And I think too, like, there's like something about, like, when you're like a little kid, when you're a little kid, you believe that stuff. You're like, there's a monster under my bed. And I don't care what you say, there's a monster under my bed. And it could just be that you felt like you were going to have a nightmare, or you felt like scared about something. And that was a legitimate feeling. There didn't have to be a literal monster under the bed for the feeling to be true that you were scared about something.
I was always scared of Freddy Krueger.
That was a good one to be afraid of. Yeah, I was too.
Knife hands.
But I also really liked Freddy. He was funny. He's a funny
I
guy.
almost just bought my dog a Freddy Krueger t-shirt. So things have changed.
Yes.
And so again, it's a process.
You're welcoming the fear.
Bring it on. Although I will not be watching any of those movies.
I have recently rewatched some of those.
They're terrible, right?
They're terrible.
Why was I ever scared?
Yeah.
Is it the first one where Nancy takes a bath and like the hand comes up? And I'm like, no, I'm never taking baths again.
Yeah, well, but you're probably not going to end up on the ceiling or anything.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Terrified. It's like I like spooky stuff, but not super scary stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. The other day, a friend of mine asked me, have you watched Sandman yet?
Not yet.
So I've watched it, and a friend of mine was like, is that okay for my kids to watch? And I was like, yeah. And then my other friend was like, no. And I was like, what? And they were like, there's that whole scene that's really dark and really scary. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. You have a different level of scary than I have of scary. And so it's hard to know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's the thing, is like, sure, you can watch Stranger Things if you're 7, it's fine. And then I'm like watching it going, okay, maybe don't let your kid watch it.
Yeah. My classroom is decorated with Stranger Things for this year. Cause I'm a middle school teacher, and it starts in middle school. And
it does.
It seemed right.
Yes. And my cousin's middle school child is going to be on the podcast with me to talk about season 2. I've already recorded season 1 in Friendship. So and I'm like, this is perfect. She's the same age as the kids when it's happening. And I'm like, amazing. And I just love Stranger Things. I would have geeked out if I was your student. I would have been
yeah. A lot of the kids are like, I love this. And other ones are like, I can't watch this. My parents don't let me watch this. And
you're
okay,
like,
then don't watch it. I'm not telling you to watch it.
I need to see pictures of this though, for real. It sounds amazing.
I will send you pictures. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to put a mind flayer on the wall.
Yes, that's what I was gonna ask you. So like, do you have a Demogorgon? Is there a mind flayer?
I have a pet Demogorgon. I have a pet Demogorgon. So I bought an action figure and I put it in an aquarium in my room. And so it's the class pet for the year.
Did they name it?
Not yet. Okay. They're like, I think some of them are looking at me like, is this for real?
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's really real. I wish as a college professor, I had one room so I could decorate it. I guess that's my office, but whatever. No one cares about my office.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So like, this is my room and I'm going to decorate it. And I would want to decorate it with Stranger Things. But a little bit of an aside.
It's a good one.
Yes. Because I am a novice. Like, is there things that I missed that you would want to talk about in terms of tarot, whether it be what you enjoy about it, how people can use it, any of those sorts of things?
Well, I would say if people are interested in learning how to read tarot, first of all, I would just say look for images that speak to you, and don't limit yourself to like, oh, well, somebody said I had to learn to read tarot with the original Rider-Waite deck. The Rider-Waite deck never spoke to me. I couldn't learn on that. Yeah. I did have one deck that I got from a friend of mine in like, I don't know, 96. And I literally read with that deck until I got the new one. And I'm reading with Tarot of Mystical Moments right now. and it is really beautiful. And it's the first one that spoke to me in a long time. And so finding images that have your kind of image that speaks directly to you is really important. And I would say, like, look for the right things, the language that speaks to you. And I would also say that there are plenty of books out there that will teach you tarot. There's one of the ones that if people are like, well, what is the book I should get if I want to learn to read tarot? There's one called Tarot 101 that does it sounds cheesy. It's a dumb name, but it's a good book. And it begins to touch on the numerology and like how like 7s mean spiritual stuff and 5s mean conflict. And so once you learn like that those numbers in each suit are going to mean that in a different thing, it helps you like move a little quicker. It also connects it a little bit to Kabbalah, and they do a really fun thing in that book where they connect it to characters in film and literature. So you can be like, okay, so this is Empress energy, or this is this. So you can like see it play out in front of you. And my encouragement is to like people that you know in your life be like, oh, they're like this card, you know,
that would
like
totally be what I would do.
because then you're like, oh, so that's what when the emperor gets mad, that's what they're like, you know.
Oh my goodness, I want to do that with TV characters.
Oh yeah. I mean, any way that you can start to identify it, like, and connect it, like that's the thing. Making the correspondences in whatever language you speak. I sometimes, like, for a little while, Facebook had a thing where I could put the song with it. I was like, oh, this is the song that goes with this card. And on Instagram, when I post it, in my stories, I put a song with it. I'm like, this is the feeling that I get. Like, you need this song to go with this card.
Yeah. I need to be sure I'm seeing your stories, because I usually see it on Facebook, but I also like the idea, like I'm very much like connect to things, and one of my favorite things ever is television, and you know, just thinking about ways to connect with other people through the things that they like and they know. So a lot of examples I use in class are from music, TV, movies, etc., real life, news, everything. And so I just find that it resonates more for me when there are those connections. So
there's I forget who coined it, but there's a word that, you know, we're Homo sapiens, but I've heard us called Homo symbolicus, that we're constantly making symbols, and we need those connections to be able to make the symbol work. And so like I love like and like I've had discussions with other tarot friends that are like, oh, you think that this person represents this? Because I think they represent that. And like, it's just fun. It can build good connection between people to have that conversation too.
Well, and so since you mentioned tarot friends, do you know them because they also read tarot, or you were friends first and then discovered it? And do you all do tarot together?
So I have, off the top of my head, I have like 3 really close friends that I think we were all kind of doing it independently. And then we were friends, and then we're like, oh, and so we read for each other. And like, because it's really hard to read for yourself.
Okay.
You know, and so just even like sometimes like one of my friends and I will exchange, like, I pulled this one today and I think it means this. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
You know, or like, I'm feeling like it meant this for me, and they might get a different feeling. And so you can kind of like, it's nice to have friends to share the symbols with, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that just made me think, I don't know why this popped into my head, but you know, I always think of tarot as individual readings, right? Is there such a thing as like where people read cards for couples and things like that?
I've done couples readings before.
Have you ever done friendship readings?
I have not, but maybe I should. That would be
amazing.
I've done like a few couples readings, and you know, you can also read for like groups, like people, and I haven't done it really, but like people will read for like, you know, well, I guess my daily pulls are kind of this. Like, what's the energy around right now for the United States? What's going on for this company? Yeah, let's not really talk about. But like, you know, being whatever you want to ask, you just signify. You just say, okay, I'm asking about this, and you kind of concentrate on that, and then you're like, this card means this, and you're like, okay. So you can read for groups and individuals and couples and
classrooms.
Yeah.
As we're both teachers,
every year I have kids that are like, they find my Instagram or something.
Of course they do.
And of course they do. They're smart. Yeah. And they're like, will you read for me? And I'm like, no, my grandmother taught me not to read for children. So.
You have to come back when you're 18.
And then they do. Some of them do. Them do. So I feel like they're interested too, because I think that children inherently know this stuff. Mm-hmm. I think kids pick up on this so much easier than adults.
I also think that there's just maybe a more thirst for understanding.
True. Yeah.
Like trying to figure things out. And as you mentioned, and this might have been off mic, but like middle schoolers are figuring out who they are, right? Mm-hmm. So younger folks, there's a lot to figure out. Yeah. And maybe as adults, we think we've got it all figured out. And spoiler alert, we don't.
Yes. The process is ongoing.
Yes, it never ends, just like laundry. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned that reading for yourself can be difficult. So for those who are listening, can they have you read their cards?
Yes, they can.
So more.
I do schedule readings. And like I said, I do half hour and I do a full hour. Lately, I'm also trying to learn the Gene Keys system, which is a lot of work, but I've been dabbling with, like, if you do a reading with me, I'll also pull your Gene Keys and we can talk about that a little bit too.
What are Gene Keys? I don't know what this is.
It's human design, which is based in astrology and the I Ching and stuff like that. So other divination systems. And so I've been reading a lot about Gene Keys and trying to figure that one out. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I wouldn't charge people for that, but I'm like trying to figure it out. So I'll be like, can I pull your chart?
Yeah. And you can figure it out, work on it.
Yeah. And also, like, starting in September, October, and November. No, wait. Yes. September, October, November. I'm doing some deep dive classes. So September, I have a small group cohort that's doing a deep dive on the tower. And so the way those work is we do we meet 2 Sunday mornings and I go over like correspondences and planetary relationships and things like that connect the cards. And then the last one, we do art around our own understandings to kind of create our own images that connect. And then in October, I forget which one I said I'm doing in October, and then November. So I like to have like little bites, little ways in that if you're interested in learning, and especially I felt like the tower is one that so many people are afraid of, that I felt like it'd be a good one to start with, because I also believe the tower is the one that once you've actually embraced that energy, that's when life gets a little bit more powerful.
This sounds amazing. How do I sign up?
Just let me know.
Okay.
Yeah, just let me know. But it's and it's fun because I do think that being able to, and you probably know this as a teacher, like, it's one thing to intake information and it's another thing to create with it.
Yes.
And then, and so like, until you're creating around your knowing, you probably aren't really understanding. And so
you got to get your hands dirty, so to speak.
And it doesn't, and like, the thing is, like, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to be really good at art. I'm not going to be,
I'm terrible, but let's do it.
It doesn't matter if it's good. It's like how you relate to it. And like, it's suddenly like you're a creator and you're able to look at what you need to see. And like, I don't know. Yeah. So I like to give people time and space to like create from what their knowing is too.
That's so cool.
Thanks.
So then if people wanted to know more or follow on Instagram so they can see your cards daily, where can they find you?
You can find me at the Starling Creative on Instagram. And I also have a website that has information and where you can book readings with me and stuff called starlingartstudios.com.
Perfect. And I'll add it to show notes so that people can locate that information. Amy, I've learned so much and I can't wait to hopefully do some of the stuff, because as you just said, you have to be able to create to really be in it to win it, I guess.
Yes.
But this has been super fun. I feel like in a lot of ways, having these conversations it sparks a lot of ideas and ways to connect and how it resonates. And now I have to go find my deck because I also want to know who the artist is, and then, look at the guidebook and start like going through it. And so this has been really informative, but also a lot of fun to talk to you about. So thank you for coming on the podcast and talking about the cool things you do.
Thanks for letting me talk about the cool things I do.
Such a fun time talking to Amy about reading tarot. Learned a lot. So cool. Joined the class about the tower so I can report back on that. Follow me on Instagram at Friends with Alysa. And actually tell me about the cool things you do, and maybe we can be friends and I can interview you about the cool things you do. Do you have friends that do cool things and you think the world should know about it? Then let me know. And also, are we friends and you haven't told me about something cool you did, which seems totally rude? But again, let me know. Y'all can email me at friendswithalysa@gmail.com or find me on any of the social media, Friends with Alysa on Twitter. Unfortunately, it's Friends W Alysa because they did not like all the characters. So until next time, friends, think about all the cool things you do, all the cool things your friends do, and let's appreciate all those cool things in all our friends, because without our friends, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.